Hey there everyone, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. I am a firm believer that a couple, be they dating or married, can play D&D without playing favorites or getting jealous. But this next story does not help that case. To the post. She wanted attention. He wanted control. We wanted out. By Reddit user Solaria007. The campaign was classic 5th edition high fantasy. After about 6 sessions, our monk, Zach, asked if his girlfriend, Tina, could join. He said she was really creative and had been wanting to try roleplay. She rolled a tiefling bard named Nira, who introduced herself mid-session by interrupting a tense standoff between our group and a cult lieutenant. She walked into the scene playing a lute and said, "Why fight when we could make music instead?" The cultist rolled low on insight, so the dungeon master played along, and she defused the fight. We thought, okay, she might be fun. In the next session, Nira flirts with every party member, constantly. Our paladin is a 60-year-old ex-conscript with a dead family and chronic leg pain. Nira says, "He's weathered. Like a tree with deep roots I want to press my back against." The table laughs nervously, though Tina doesn't. Then she starts describing her outfit every session. Always some variation of corset, soft boots, nothing underneath. We get a weekly monologue about how Nira braids her hair, what perfume she wears, and how she leans in too close without noticing. Then Zach's character, the monk, starts getting weirdly aggressive. He's suddenly cold to the other players, always interrupting them in dialogue. When our druid complimented Nira's harp playing, Zach immediately said, "My character doesn't trust you anymore." Then it got worse. Whenever another player so much as talked to Nira, Zach's character would glare or leave the room. In one session, Nira was unconscious after a fight, and the cleric healed her. Tina said, "Nira wakes up and softly touches his face." Zach immediately says, "I punched the cleric." DM says, "Why?" And Zach responds, "He touched her. He doesn't get to do that." In real life, Zach and Tina start bickering in front of us. Tina says, "You're doing this because you're insecure." Zach says, "You're making your character slutty on purpose." Tina responds, "You said I could play whatever I wanted." Zach says back, "Not if it's just you being weird with everyone." They then go outside to argue for 20 minutes. We awkwardly sit around. They come back. We try to keep going, and Tina now plays Nira completely silent and withdrawn, describes her as grieving something she can't explain. This session ends early. They skip the next week, and then the dungeon master gets a text. "We're taking a break. Thanks for letting us try. I think we need to focus on our relationship right now." TLDR. A guy brought his girlfriend into the game, and it instantly turned into a sexual tension minefield. She flirted with everyone. He got jealous. They argued in front of us, and plotted the game by trying to work out their relationship via fantasy characters. Well, if you ask me, their relationship needs a lot of work if it couldn't withstand roleplay in Dungeons & Dragons. Now, did Tina maybe go a bit hard on the flirtatious roleplay with the other players? Well, obviously. Though, if it bothered Zach that much, then he should have talked to her in private about that, instead of just blowing up in-game against other characters. I mean, it's not like they were reciprocating her flirtations at all. So yeah, this is just a case of two people in a relationship that aren't mature enough to handle a D&D game. Let's move on to yet another story about couples playing a tabletop RPG together. But, well, they never actually get to the game. To the post. Game Master's girlfriend ruins game before it starts. By Reddit user Infinite One Corridor. A relatively light-hearted story here, but still funny in hindsight. The setup for the story is pretty basic. I responded to a looking for game post, looking for Blades in the Dark players, and I meet with the game master and his girlfriend, who felt the need to sit in on the initial interview. Not that big of a deal generally, but it did strike me as odd. Whatever, they both seemed cool, and I pitched my character and talked about safety tools, lines and veils specifically. My character was using the slide playbook. Think a slinky spy character who is good at talking to people. There are moves for gaining bonuses to roll against targets that you have an intimate relationship with, etc., and was an exotic dancer and sex worker from a demonic homeland who used the dances that were used to pacify demons in his homeland as an act to entertain sleazy nobles. I wanted to play with the themes of commodifying and sexualizing important cultural arts, and asking the question of whether its profession and skills were empowering or degrading. Fun stuff. Tends to fit in well with a grimy, crime-infested setting like Duskfall, the main setting of Blades in the Dark. However, the sexual themes of the character and the inclusion of sex work as a theme can be touchy for some people, so I was careful to discuss this up front. This becomes important later. So I hop in the Discord for a pre-Session 0 brainstorm, and the Game Master and his girlfriend spend the entire time talking with an old friend of theirs, also a player in the game, about Minecraft server drama. At this point, I'm mildly annoyed, but since Session 0 was scheduled for later that week, I shrugged it off and prepped for that. During Session 0, I said I was on a time crunch, since I had a doctor's appointment, and I was assured that we could get things done in a few hours. So, for the first 45 minutes to an hour of Session 0, Game Master, Game Master's girlfriend, and Game Master's other friend talk about friend group drama. At some point during this conversation, I say that I have my appointment coming up, so could we please talk about character concepts and what crew playbook everyone was interested in. The other players agree, and everyone has a character concept prepped. Everyone except Game Master's girlfriend, who had the vague idea of playing a mad scientist who reanimates corpses. That's it. Okay, so this can be fleshed out through brainstorming. The group seems to be into the idea of playing assassins, so we brainstorm a group dynamic and throw some bones at Game Master's girlfriend about how her character could use poisons and contraptions to pull off some assassinations, and her character would need to be able to contribute to the group on missions. Game Master's girlfriend is really quiet throughout this process, and Game Master is contributing here and there. Then, GM's girlfriend suddenly leaves the call, and Game Master leaves to go talk to his girlfriend while the rest of us just talk about character dynamics. 30 minutes later, our happy couple returns, and Game Master says that not everyone in the group wanted to play as assassins, and we should try to be mindful of what everyone wants. Everyone awkwardly moves on to be thieves or smugglers instead because of this diversion, so we don't finish up Session 0 and have to continue at a later date. The next day, right before another game I'm game mastering, I receive a message in the server from the Game Master's girlfriend about how she doesn't want any flirting between player characters and NPCs because, and I quote, "That's my boyfriend, smiley face." At this point, contemplating a lobotomy, I ask, so basically I need to completely scrap my character concept? She responded with an, "I guess so, yeah." So I shrugged and dropped the campaign immediately, stating that I was not interested in playing because of the poor communication, and I left the server. Then, the Game Master's girlfriend proceeds to slide into my DMs, sending me 8 to 10 messages as I begin game mastering for my friends, asking me why I was leaving. And to answer her, I tell her that I'm in a game at the moment, and that I will respond later. Then she proceeds to message me repeatedly throughout my session. Eventually, I messaged back, stating that I did not like how my work on a character was basically thrown away on a boundary that I explicitly asked about multiple times and even got a red flag on. That it was poor communication at best. I also said that I didn't like the Game Master's girlfriend behavior of leaving when she didn't like what everyone was going for in Session 0, despite her refusal to communicate, and then having her boyfriend step in for her after she threw a tantrum. She shot back at me by accusing me of commandeering the game because I asked if we could move on from the damn Minecraft server drama and actually play, and said that it wasn't fair to expect her to be comfortable speaking in front of everyone, and that she didn't know that she'd have to have a concept prepared. At this point, I ended the conversation by saying that if she and her boyfriend couldn't act like adults and communicate with everyone honestly, then they probably shouldn't bother playing RPGs, because throwing tantrums and leaving instead of asking to change things isn't acceptable at all, and neither was randomly changing boundaries and forcing people to scrap concepts. I told her to not message me again, and that was that. Later, I received a message from another player who also dropped the game, asking me what happened, which was kinda funny. I feel like I dodged a bullet on this one, and in hindsight, it is kinda funny. Oh, and an important addition. I was the youngest person involved in this story, at age 22. If my memory serves me correctly, the Game Master and his girlfriend were in their mid-20s. So yeah, miss me with that crap. Yeah, that sounds like the type of risk you have when you join a game where the Game Master's significant other is going to be playing in. Now don't get me wrong, there are plenty of games out there where the Dungeon Master is in a relationship with a player and things go great. I'm in one, for example. But if said relationship is toxic, codependent, and has any jealous mindsets involved, then playing a tabletop RPG with a significant other is a bad idea. And I also experienced this firsthand with my first try at D&D years ago, which, as you can guess, didn't last long. Thankfully though, OP was able to see the writing on the wall here, and not give any more of their precious time to this eventual train wreck of a game, especially when their character concept that was okayed by the DM got dismantled because my boyfriend is DM and I can't stand him, even roleplay characters, getting intimate. Which, that is a huge red flag that she couldn't separate the game from reality. Now, before we move on, if you could, liking and sharing the video really does help out the channel. And to help convince you to do so, here is Luna being cute. She's such a sweetheart. But with that, let's get to the next story about a dungeon master TPKing the players with a really stupid event. To the post. Getting TPK'd by the DM and his wife. By Reddit user RockTornadog. I joined in late to a session, and I didn't really know what was going on. For some reason, everyone was in the middle of fighting guards, when all of a sudden, a spooky unknown voice asked every character if they wanted help. One person said yes, and they told the voice that they wanted, quote, every single one of the player characters to be killed. The player who asked this just so happens to be the DM's wife. Also, as a word of note, we are all level 6 at this point. Our backpacks all of a sudden have a magical force of nature trying to suck our bodies inside of each of our backpacks. Something kind of like a black hole, sucking our very essence into said backpacks. The next thing I know, we are all separately rolling for grapple checks, all simultaneously. The DM did a, quote, group roll, saying that he rolled a nat 20 for the unknown force's grapple checks. So everyone had to roll a nat 20, or else they would be grappled, magically sucked into a bag of holding, and then immediately killed. As a reaction, because the only thing allowed for me to do was a reaction, I did a silvery barbs on the guy doing it against me. I ended up rolling a nat 20 on a grapple check, so I succeeded. So I'm like, oh wow, that's pretty cool. I'm not going to die by this seemingly impossible situation. Well, my hopes and dreams were immediately squashed when the DM proceeded to say, okay, the evil force is going to attempt to grapple you again. I roll less good this time, and then I am forcibly sucked into this bag of holding. Every character failed their grapple checks and got sucked into separate bags of holding. And then we see a third-person view of our character's world being exploded into oblivion, as our world was apparently a giant bag of holding, and we were put into another bag of holding, thus causing an enormous explosion and causing a TPK. In rules as written, this is an impossible situation, because you can't have a bag of holding in the first place having a bag of holding inside of it. The DM made this up, and somehow felt it was appropriate to rule it as that was the causation of the explosion finally happening. The Dungeon Master said the guy who did this to us was the big bad, and that this was supposed to be a longer campaign, and not just 3 sessions, but that there just so happened to be all the exact worst possible scenarios that all coincided with one another, along with some unlucky nat 1 rolls to see what happened. And that's why it was a TPK. The Dungeon Master proceeded to say that he still wants to run a campaign for us, and he would let us choose what kind of a theme we wanted. And the majority of people said they wanted a horror campaign setting, though I don't know if I want to even join in on that. I put in a lot of work with my previous character, and it felt like all player autonomy I had been frivolously taken away from me. I don't think I can trust this guy dungeon mastering for me anymore. He took zero responsibility for his decisions that he has made as a DM, and that is quite a huge deal in my opinion. Well, that was just really stupid. I mean, why even have that be a scenario if you're planning for the game to last longer than 3 sessions? Also, that whole thing with the bags was, well, really stupid. First off, if the characters are somehow in a world that is within a bag of holding, they shouldn't have bags of holding. But to say that if they get sucked into a bag of holding, then there would still be time for the characters to survive inside one. It just sounds to me like this DM didn't like the theme of this campaign and just wanted to scrap it. But instead of saying as much, did this whole song and dance with his girlfriend as the accomplice. So I don't blame OP for being apprehensive about starting a new campaign with this dude at the helm. But with that, it looks like we have time for one more story, in which a player may be too into D&D. To the post. A player handed me, the Dungeon Master, a 65-page character backstory by Reddit user Icaros5. Pretty much what the title says. I've been a DM for 2 campaigns, and right now, I'm running Tomb of Annihilation with the same group. One of my players is really into D&D, constantly writing character ideas, sending me concepts for future campaigns, ones I haven't even started planning and may never run, and even making a separate group chat just to share D&D stuff with me so it doesn't get lost in our main messages. His last character for Tomb of Annihilation had a 15-page backstory, which was already a lot, but I let it slide since it's a long campaign, about 2 years, and he was super engaged. But now, he handed me a 65-page backstory for a character who might only be in the game for 3 to 5 sessions. And that's not even the final version. He told me he trimmed it down and left out some factions and NPCs. How we got here. During a session, we had one of those classic DM-player exchanges. DM, are you sure you want to do that? Player, yes. DM, are you really sure? Player, yes. Well, his character got captured by the BBEG. I told him he'd be out of the game until the party rescued him, which could take a few sessions. but I offered him the chance to roll up a temporary character so he wouldn't just be sitting around. He agreed, and then dropped this massive backstory on me. The dilemma. Look, I appreciate the effort. He's by far the most engaged player in the group, and I don't want to just dismiss all his hard work. But I also can't realistically read, process, and incorporate 65 pages of lore into the campaign, especially for a temporary character. This isn't even his main character, just a short-term one. To make things more complicated, this player expects his backstories to be used extensively. In Tomb of Annihilation, he's made comments like, "You haven't included this part of my backstory yet," or, "You've only used about 30% of what I wrote." And that was with 15 pages. I can only imagine what he'd expect with 65. On top of all of this, he's also a very good friend, and I don't want to upset him or make him feel like his creativity isn't appreciated. But I need to set some kind of limit. Otherwise, this will just keep escalating. Any ideas on how to handle this situation without hurting his feelings or making him feel unmotivated to play? TLDR. A player gave me a 65-page backstory, mostly text and barely any images, for a temporary character. I don't want to hurt his feelings because he's a friend and very passionate about D&D. But this is way too much, and I can't read or incorporate all of it. How do I handle this without upsetting him? Edit. After reading hundreds of responses, I've noticed a pattern. The average D&D group writes between a few paragraphs to a page of backstory. I wanted to clarify that, at least in our group, we do write a bit more than that. From 1 to 3 pages for the less dedicated players, to up to 4 to 6 for the more dedicated ones. This is not to say 65 is not a lot. It clearly is. I just wanted to give some context on the average backstory pages my players tend to write. Well, that is quite a lot of pages, especially for a temporary character, and in Tomb of Annihilation of all modules. My advice would be to just be upfront with him. Tell him that you have way too much on your plate to read, and let alone incorporate all that lore just for one character, with that character being temporary. Let him know that you appreciate his enthusiasm, but that is just way too much for this campaign. If he's really your friend, then I think you would understand. So yeah, I think honesty is the best policy here, and in any other situation. Though, that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and hope that your games remain horror story free. Until next time.